They didn't come to my wedding, they didn't even call me, they just vanished and acted like I never existed, and all because I decided to get married before my golden sister. You have no idea what that did to me, the pain, the humiliation, the silence in the church, when the most important people in my life chose to ignore me on the most important day of my life. And you know what's worse, they didn't just stay Emily, my perfect sister, she did something so cruel that even now I don't know if I can ever forgive her. And yeah, you might think I did something wrong, maybe I rushed things, maybe I wasn't ready, maybe I should have waited for Emily to shine first like they always wanted, but let me tell you this story, because the truth is way more twisted than it seems. My name is Mary, and today I'm going to share something Eve never told anyone before, and I want you here with me the whole time. And before we dive fundo into it, I just want to ask one thing from you. Real quick, hit that subscribe button because we're so close to hitting our goal. And if you like historias reis como eso você vai amar, ok vem por aí, ok vamos começar. I grew up in a family where love always came with conditions, where silence spoke louder than hugs, and where everything I did was just never quite enough, not because I was bad, not because I didn't try, but because I had a sister, Emily, and Emily was everything they wanted. She was smart, beautiful, elegant, the type of girl who never made a mistake, the kind of daughter you put in porta retrato and show to the neighbors, and there I was always trying to be noticed, just wishing they all hacem pra mim por segundo. I was the girl who brought home good grades, and no one celebrava. I was the one who stayed quiet, so no one bragas. I was the daughter who tried to be perfect, but who always lost before the game even started. And for a long time I thought that was just life. Some people are born stars, and others are born to watch from the crowd. But then Liam came into my life, and everything changed. And this is where it all begins, because the day I said yes to Liam was the day my family said no to me. Growing up with Emily was like living next to a spotlight that never turned off. No matter what I did, the light was always on her. It didn't matter if I tried harder, studied longer, or cried at night, because no one noticed. Every birthday, every family dinner, every school award somehow turned into something about Emily. If I got a B, she got an A. If I joined a club, she became the president. If I made a friend, she became their favorite. She wasn't me, not at first, she just existed in this untouchable way. Like a painting you hang on the wall and stare at, like perfection itself. And my parents, well, they adored her, they praised her every move. Her voice was music to them. When she walked into a room, everyone smiled. When I walked in, it felt like I was blocking the view. Even the way they looked at us was different. When Emily talked, they leaned in. When I spoke, they nodded politely and moved on. And over time, I stopped talking, I stopped trying, because it felt like no matter what I did, I would never be good enough. Emily could never be wrong even when she was, and me, I could never be right even when I was. And that did something to me. It built this quiet sadness inside me, this feeling of being invisible, like I was just a background character in my own life. And the worst part was I believed it. I believed I didn't deserve more. I believed that maybe love just wasn't for me, that some people are born lucky and others just watch from the sidelines. And then came Liam. Liam wasn't like anyone I had ever met. He noticed me, really noticed me. He laughed at my jokes. He asked how my day was, and actually listened when I answered. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room, like I was enough just the way I was. I remember the first time I brought him home, and how my mom looked at him like he was some kind of mistake. She said he was too simple, too normal, not good enough for a daughter of hers. But I wasn't Emily. I wasn't the one she imagined showing off to her friends. I wasn't the one she wanted to. She walked down the aisle in a designer dress with a rich lawyer by her side, and Liam, he knew it. He saw the way they treated me, and he hated it, but he never pushed, he never told me to fight them. He just stayed by my side and waited for me to believe that I was worth more. And when he asked me to marry him, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes, because in that moment, I felt like my life was finally mine, like I was choosing me for the first time ever. And that terrified my parents. They couldn't understand how I was getting married before Emily, how I could dare make such a decision without their blessing. They acted like I had broken some unspoken rule, like I had stolen something from my sister, something sacred and unreplaceable. But Emily, she didn't even have a boyfriend. She wasn't engaged. She wasn't planning a wedding. She wasn't even dating. But still they treated it like a betrayal, like I was trying to hurt her on purpose. And the way they looked at me changed overnight. It wasn't just disappointment, it was coldness, like I had revealed some ugly truth about myself by simply choosing to be happy. And I started to wonder, had they ever loved me at all, or had they only tolerated me because they had to? And now that I was stepping out of line, they finally had an excuse to show how they really felt. And maybe part of me still hoped they would come around, that they'd remember I was their daughter too, that I mattered. But that hope was slipping fast, because the more I planned the wedding, the more they pulled away. And Emily, she said nothing at first, just watched and smiled. And I should have known that smile meant something more, something darker, because Emily always had a way of getting what she wanted, even if she had to play dirty. And I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to stay the golden child. I met Liam at the library, which is funny because I never used to go there. It was raining and I just needed a place to sit and dry off, and he was there alone reading, and he looked up and smiled, and I swear it was the first time someone saw me, not like they were seeing through me but really seeing me, and we started talking, and something about him made me feel calm, like for the first time I didn't have to perform or pretend he didn't care about perfect posture or perfect words. He just liked me, and that scared me a little because I wasn't used to being liked just for existing. But Liam didn't flinch. He kept showing up every day. He would wait for me outside the library. He brought coffee. He remembered little things like my favorite book or that I liked my sandwiches with no crust. And day by day, I started to let my guard down. I started to believe that maybe someone could actually love me without comparing me to Emily. And Liam never once brought her up. He didn't care that she was prettier or more polished or that my parents would never approve. He just wanted me, and that meant everything to me. The first time he told me he loved me, I cried, not because I was overwhelmed, but because deep down I didn't think anyone ever would. And Liam, he held me and said he would love me even if the world turned against us. And in a way it did, because when we started talking about marriage, I knew exactly what that meant. It meant dealing with my family again. It meant opening the door to their judgment, to their disappointment. And I was scared. I was really scared, but Liam wasn't. He said, Mary, this is our life, not theirs. And if they can't see that, then we walk it without them. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be that strong. And we decided together, quietly, just the two of us, that we would get married, not in a big fancy way, not with drama, just love and simplicity. And I remember the moment he got down on one knee. It wasn't at some fancy dinner or beach trip. It was in our tiny kitchen while we were cooking pasta, and he had tomato sauce on his shirt, and I laughed, and he pulled out the ring and said, Eve, never been more sure of anything. And I said yes, without even thinking, because I loved him more than I feared their reactions. And for the first time in my life, I chose me. And that night, I called my parents and told them I was engaged, and the silence on the other end felt like a door closing. My mom said nothing for a full 10 seconds, and then she asked, what about Emily? And I said, what about her? And she said, isn't she supposed to be first? And I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. And I said, Mom, Emily isn't even dating anyone. And she said, but still, this will crush her. And I felt that old ache in my chest, that feeling of being pushed aside, of being the problem for simply existing. And my dad, he just said, I'm disappointed, and hung up. And that was it. No congratulations. No questions about the date. No, are you happy? Nothing, just silence and judgment. And I sat there staring at the phone, and Liam came over and hugged me and said, you did the right thing. And I believed him, but part of me still hoped they would change, that they'd come around, that maybe Emily would be happy for me. But deep down I knew better, and I was right, because things were about to get a whole lot worse. A few days after I told my parents about the engagement, Emily came to visit. She walked into my apartment like she owned the place, wearing that perfect coat with her perfect smile, and said, so it's true, you really said yes? I nodded and smiled, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd be happy for me. But she sat down, crossed her legs, and said, Mom is devastated. And I said, devastated? Why? And she said, because you know, this should have been my moment first. And I said, Emily, you're not even in a relationship. And she said, that's not the point. The point is you knew how important this was to her, and you did it anyway. And I looked at her, trying to understand if she was joking, if she was testing me, but her face was stone cold. And then she said, I just hope you're ready for the consequences. And I said, consequences for falling in love? And she said, for stealing what wasn't yours. And then she left just like that, like she had delivered some royal decree. And from that moment, everything changed. The coldness from my parents turned into distance, and then into complete silence. No calls, no texts, not even a message to ask how I was doing. And it hurt more than I expected. It felt like they were punishing me for being happy, like I had broken a rule that no one ever explained to me. And Liam, he kept saying, forget them, let's just focus on us. But part of me still hoped they'd change, hoped they'd call and say sorry, hoped they'd show up with flowers and tears and admit they were wrong. But what came next was even worse. I started getting messages from relatives, distant aunts, cousins, even people I hadn't talked to in years, saying things like, I heard you hurt your sister, or maybe you should wait, or this is causing a lot of stress for the family. And I realized they were poisoning everyone against me. They were painting me as selfish, as cruel, as the girl who didn't care about family. And the more I tried to explain, the more I sounded defensive, and I stopped answering the messages, stopped opening the apps, and just tried to breathe. But it was hard, really hard, because I wanted them there. I wanted my mom to help me pick the dress. I wanted my dad to walk me down the aisle. But every dream I had about that day was fading fast. And Emily wasn't done, not even close. She started posting vague things on social media about betrayal, about people changing. And suddenly people were commenting under my photos saying I should be ashamed. And it broke me. For a moment I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should cancel. And Liam sat me down and looked me in the eyes and said, Mary, if you wait, they win. And if you cancel, you lose yourself. And that was it. That was the moment I realized I had to choose me fully, completely, even if it meant doing it alone. So we kept planning. We found a new venue, a small, beautiful garden near the coast. We kept the guest list short, just people who truly cared. And every time I saw the empty RSVP spots for my family, my heart sank a little more. And one day, I got a call from the venue manager saying something strange happened. Someone had tried to cancel our reservation, but they couldn't confirm who it was because the number wasn't listed, and my stomach dropped because I knew exactly who it was, and I was right because 2 hours later my mom texted me saying, "Are you sure you want to do this? This place doesn't suit our standards." And it was then I knew they'd tried to cancel it themselves to stop the wedding without even talking to me, and that was the final straw. I didn't reply. I didn't argue, I just blocked the number and cried, and Liam held me and said, "We're still doing this and it's going to be beautiful." And I believed him I had to, because at that point I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. After I blocked my mom's number, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd give up, maybe they'd let me live my life and move on. But I was wrong, because what came next wasn't silence, it was sabotage. They couldn't stop the wedding with guilt or pressure. So they tried something else, something worse. First it was Little Things. The florist called and said someone asked to change the delivery address. Then the bakery said someone called pretending to be me to cancel the cake. And when I asked if they gave a name, they just said a woman with a similar voice, and I knew it was her. I knew it was my mom, or maybe even Emily, and that made everything feel so much heavier, because it wasn't just rejection anymore, it was war. It was them actively trying to ruin what little happiness I had. And then one night I got an email from the photographer saying they had received a message asking to reschedule the shoot to a different date, and when I checked the message, it was from an account with my sister's name on it. I showed it to Liam, and he was furious. He said this has to stop now, and I agreed, but I didn't know how, because these people were my family, the ones who were supposed to protect me, and all they did was tear me down. And the worst part was Emily. She acted like nothing was happening. She still posted happy selfies, smiling with captions about love and loyalty, while behind the scenes she was doing everything she could to sabotage my life. And one day I saw a post from her that said, "Some people will steal your light, but karma always finds its way." And I just stared at it, wondering how someone could be so fake, so calculated, and yet still be loved by everyone around her. And Liam, he said, "Let's elope, let's just disappear and do it without the noise." But I couldn't let them take that from me too. I wanted my day. I wanted to wear the dress. I chose to walk down the aisle with music and joy, and to look around and know that I chose this, and that it mattered, and that even without their approval, I still had the right to be happy. So we doubled down. We checked every vendor twice. We created passwords for every booking. We warned everyone not to take changes unless they heard directly from us, and things started to calm down a bit. And then just 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an anonymous letter, no name, no return address, just a plain envelope with a note inside that said, "He's only marrying you out of pity. Everyone sees it, but you." And I felt like the ground disappeared under me for a second, like the air left the room, because that letter felt like poison, like it was written to destroy me from the inside. And I showed it to Liam, and he was quiet for a moment. Then he crumpled it and threw in the trash and said, "If they think a letter can shake us, they have no idea who we are." And I hugged him and cried, and for the first time in weeks I felt strong again, because even though everything around me was falling apart, he was still there standing beside me. And then something strange happened 2 days later. Emily texted me. She said, "Hey, I know things have been tense, but can we talk?" And I stared at the message for a long time, debating if I should reply. And eventually I did. I said okay, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. And when she arrived, she was all smiles, like nothing had happened. And she sat down and said, "I just want to understand why you're rushing into this." And I said, "I'm not rushing, I'm just living." And she said, "But don't you think you're making a mistake?" And I said, "No, Emily, the only mistake I ever made was believing that you cared about me." And she looked offended and said, "Of course I care." And I asked her then, "Why did you try to cancel my vendors? Why did you post all those things? Why are you trying so hard to ruin this for me?" And she denied everything, said she had no idea what I was talking about, said maybe it was a misunderstanding. And then she said, "Maybe this is your guilt talking, maybe deep down you know you're not ready." And I stood up and said, "Emily, I'm done trying to make you understand. This is my life, and I'm getting married." And I left without looking back, and walking away from her felt like shedding a weight I had been carrying for years, because for the first time I wasn't trying to please her or protect her feelings or get her approval. I was just being me, and that was enough. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before the sun. The world was still dark and quiet, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. I got out of bed, walked to the window, and just stared out at the sky, breathing in the silence, knowing that this day was mine, no matter what, no matter who showed up or didn't. I was going to marry the man I loved, and nothing could ruin that, not anymore. I got dressed, slowly feeling the fabric of the dress on my skin, the same dress I had chosen by myself with no help from my mom, no emotional tears from my dad, no family around, just me and Liam and love. And when I looked in the mirror, I felt beautiful, not because of the makeup or the hair, but because I knew who I was, and I was proud of her. We arrived at the garden early. Everything was simple but perfect. The flowers, the chairs, the music, the soft breeze, it all felt like a dream. And guests started to arrive, some friends, some co-workers, people who truly cared, who had seen me cry and laugh and grow over the years. But The seats in the front row remained empty, the ones I had saved, the ones I still hoped would be filled by my parents, by Emily, but they never came, not a message, not a call, not even a whisper of apology, and that hurt more than I thought it would, because some part of me still believed they might change their mind, still hoped they would show up at the last second and surprise me, but they didn't, and when the music started, and I took my first step down the aisle, my heart was beating so fast I thought it might stop, but then I saw Liam standing there waiting for me with tears in his eyes, and everything else disappeared. I walked slowly, holding my bouquet, tightly feeling every step, every second, every heartbeat, and when I reached him, he took my hand and smiled and said, "You're here," and I said, "Always," and the ceremony began. The officiant spoke words of love and commitment and truth, and I felt them deep in my bones like they were written for us, and when it was time for the vows, Liam went first. He talked about how he had seen me grow, how he had watched me find my strength, and how he promised to never let me feel invisible again. And then it was my turn, and I looked at him and said, "You are the first person who ever made me feel seen, and for that I will love you forever." And everyone clapped, and some people cried, and we kissed, and it was perfect. And for a moment I forgot all the pain, all the rejection, all the things that led us here, and I just felt happy, truly happy. But of course it wasn't over, not yet, because during the reception, while we were dancing and laughing and taking photos, someone came up to me and said, "Mary, have you seen Emily's Instagram?" And my heart sank. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and there it was. Emily had posted a photo, a shiny, perfect photo of her and her new fiancé with the caption, "I said yes today, surrounded by family and love," and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach because she chose today, of all days, to do that, to announce her engagement on the exact day of my wedding, and worse, during the exact time of my ceremony, and I stared at the screen in disbelief, wondering how someone could be so cruel, so calculated, and I showed the phone to Liam. He just shook his head and said, "Let it go," and I tried, I really did, but it hurt because she stole that moment from me one last time. And when people started commenting on her post saying congrats, asking about the ring, celebrating her news, my wedding, my joy was pushed aside again like it never mattered, and I wanted to scream, but instead I put the phone away and went back to the dance floor, and I smiled and I laughed and I danced like none of it had happened, because I refused to let her win, not this time, not anymore. And as the night went on, people came up to me and said, "This is the most beautiful wedding Eve ever seen," and I believed them, not because of the decorations or the cake, but because of the love that filled the air, because even with all the pain, all the sabotage, all the silence, I was still standing, I was still smiling, I was still me, and that was everything. And when the music slowed and Liam pulled me in for one last dance, he whispered, "You did it," and I whispered back, "We did," and that moment, that tiny, perfect moment, was mine, truly mine, and no one, not even Emily, could take that from me. And as the guests left and the lights dimmed and the night ended, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. A week after the wedding, I received a message from one of Emily's old friends, someone I barely knew. She said, "Hey, I know this is random, but I thought you should see this," and she sent me screenshots, messages between Emily and a guy who wasn't her new fiancé, and those messages weren't innocent. They were flirty, suggestive, filled with secrets and dates and little emojis that told a story of betrayal, and the timestamps showed that the messages started months ago, way before her engagement announcement, way before my wedding, and my hands started shaking because I knew exactly what this meant. Emily had been cheating, and not just emotionally, but fully sneaking around while planning her picture-perfect life. And it didn't take long for the news to spread, because someone else had those screenshots too, and soon they were everywhere, people talking, whispering, gossiping, and her fiancé found out, and when he did, he was livid. He deleted every photo of her, unfollowed her, posted a single message on his page that said, "I deserve honesty and respect, goodbye," and suddenly Emily's world began to crumble. The golden image she had worked so hard to protect shattered overnight, and for the first time in forever, people started asking questions. They started seeing her not as the flawless sister, but as a real person, one who lied, one who manipulated, one who tried to destroy someone else's happiness to protect her illusion. And I watched it all unfold, not with joy, not with revenge in my heart, but with something softer, something like relief, like maybe finally the truth was loud enough for everyone to hear. And then one evening I got a call from an unknown number, and when I answered, it was my mom. Her voice was shaking and small, and she said, "Mary, I don't know what to say." And I said, "Then don't say anything." And she started crying, really crying the way someone cries when they finally see what they've done. And she said, "I'm sorry, we were wrong, we were so wrong, and we should have been there for you." And I said, "No." And then she said, "Can we talk? Can we see you?" And I paused, because part of me wanted to scream at her, part of me wanted to say, "Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when Emily tried to ruin my wedding? Where were you when I cried alone in my room as a child?" But instead I took a deep breath and said, "Not yet." And she said, "Okay," and hung up, and it was quiet. And for the first time, their silence felt peaceful, not painful. And the next day I got a message from my dad, short and simple, just "I Miss you and am proud of you. And I stared at it for a long time, unsure how to feel, because these were words I had wanted my whole life. But now that they were here, they felt like a bandage on a wound that had already scarred. And meanwhile, Emily was silent, completely silent. Her accounts went private. Her name disappeared from the group chats. No more quotes about loyalty, no more curated perfection, just quiet. And it was strange, because I thought I would feel powerful watching her fall, but I didn't. I just felt free, because her fall wasn't my victory. It was just the end of her illusion, and maybe the beginning of something real for me. And slowly, very slowly, people started treating me differently. A cousin reached out to say she had no idea how bad it had been. An old friend from school messaged me to say she saw my wedding photos and cried because she could feel the love. And even my aunt, who used to worship Emily, commented on my post saying, "You looked beautiful and I hope you're happy." And it wasn't everything, but it was something, and I held on to that, because for the first time people saw me not as the shadow but as the light, and that changed everything, not because I needed their approval, but because I finally knew I never needed it to begin with. A few days after my mom called, I got a text from her saying, "Can we talk again?" And this time I said yes, because maybe it was time to face the ghosts and the silence between us. And when we met, it wasn't easy. Her eyes were red, her hands shaky. She said she was sorry for everything, for the pain, for the silence, for letting Emily manipulate us. And I listened, because maybe I needed to hear her words, not for her, but for me. I told her that I forgave her, but that didn't mean I was going to forget or pretend everything was okay. I said I was done being the daughter who needed their approval to be happy, and that I was choosing to love myself first. And she nodded slowly and said she understood, but she warned me that healing would take time and that maybe our family would never be perfect. But I said that was okay, because I was finally free from the chains of their expectations and the need to be perfect or invisible anymore. And my dad joined us later. That day he was quieter than my mom, but his eyes held the same sadness, the same regret. He said he was proud of me and that he hoped one day I would let him back in. And I looked at him and said, maybe someday, but not today. And it wasn't easy walking away from them. And yet it was the most liberating thing I'd ever done, because forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about letting myself go. It was about choosing peace over pain and love over resentment. And as I left that day, I felt lighter, like a weight I had carried for years was finally gone. And I knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be moments of doubt, moments when I missed what I never really had, but I also knew that I was strong enough to face them, because for the first time I was standing on my own feet, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, and that was everything. If you are watching this now and you have ever felt invisible or pushed aside, or like you had to wait for your moment, let me tell you something. Your time is now. You don't need anyone's permission to be happy, to love, to shine, to live your truth. I am Mary, and this is my story of how I chose to be my own light, even when those who were supposed to love me most turned away from me. And I want you to know that no matter what you face, no matter what challenges come your way, you can rise above. You can be stronger and happier than you ever imagined. So if this story touched you, if you felt even a little bit of the pain or the hope, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because there is so much more coming your way. And right now on your screen there is another video I picked just for you, a story that will inspire you to keep going. So click it, watch it, and don't forget to come back here, because I will always be here to share stories that remind us that we are never alone. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this journey. And until next time, keep shining.